The OSI model is not how networking works. It never was, actually. There is a paper online if you want to read it. It is called The Internet That Wasn't OSI Model. Let me bring up my Discord and I'll share it with you all. It's an IEEE article that goes through the history of the OSI model. And here it is. So this is a great history of what the OSI model was, how it was designed to be set up, and how it's in direct conflict with the TCP model. The OSI model in no way reflects actual networking. Oh, we got sound on YouTube. So I guess I'm ranting about the OSI model right now. So we'll finish up this rant really, really, really quick. And I need that. I need to download and save that real quick. I don't know who did this, but that's awesome of them. Go copy link. So I'll give you a couple of main problems. So the first problem with the OSI model is whenever they were developing the OSI model, and this is not in the article, there was since it's Open Systems Interconnect, they were trying to come up with a standard by committee, which is bad. And then they were trying to come up with a standard by committee that is an international standard by committee, and that's even worse. And as part of trying to set up the OSI model, I think it was in the 60s, when they got to the application layer, there was a huge disagreement. Once again, nerd fight between a German company and some American researchers and people at universities about what to call the application layer. Because this German group, they didn't call it an application layer, they called it their presentation layer, even though it was the exact same thing as the application. So the arguments were going back and forth and like, well, that's the application layer. And they're like, well, that's not, because that's what's being presented to the user. So we call it the presentation layer. Mind you, this all started in the 60s, people. So before they had any idea about how anything was going to work, they were arguing about these things. And the solution to the problem was not to like hash it out, hug it out like bros. No, the solution to the problem was they created a presentation and they created an application layer. So both groups would be happy, right? So if you want another way to look at this, where in Wireshark do I look at the presentation layer, right? Where would I want to create a presentation layer in Wireshark. I want to create a presentation layer filter for TCP dump. How would I write that? You wouldn't, because you can't, because it's not really a thing. So the TCP IP model, if you read that article in the 80s, believe it or not, the United States government told people to stop buying applications that were using the TCP model. And they wanted to force everybody, I think it was in 84, force everybody to use the OSI model, because the OSI model, I cannot stress this enough, is not a thing TCP won. So it's not that TCP and the OSI model is a great kind of description on how computers work. It's garbage. It needs to stop being used. And the reason why I hate it so much is because I taught the stupid thing for years. Like while I was teaching at the SANS Institute, we were going through and we were dealing with this as a problem. And finally, I decided I was going to research why in the hell am I teaching this garbage? And I started finding a bunch of the history around it. And that's why I hate the OSI model, because it confuses students. It has no real world applicability for any code that they'll write. And it's just, why are we teaching? It'd be like sitting around and teaching people Fortran, right? It's like, well, Fortran is like a really viable computer coding language, and it's a great way to teach people how computers work. Same thing with Turbo Pascal. We could teach people Turbo Pascal, right? We could just teach every student assembly, right? It's not how the world works, right? So that's my rant. Please read the article from IEEE, OSI, the internet that wasn't. But now we have everyone together. Do we have our YouTube brothers and sisters here? Did I get my YouTubes? Uh-oh, we're waiting. I'm hoping we got several people typing. There's a lot of love out there, man. A lot of love. Right? Lockheed disagrees. Yeah, I'll take that fight. All right, let's do this. All right, so let's talk about legal issues. All right. So with legal issues, sometimes there's a huge disconnect between what we think is actually legal and what is actually legal. And many of those assumptions actually are pretty well founded, because there's not a lot of case law that exists in the world of computer security. Even though it's been around for like a few dozen years, it's still new, right? Like if we're looking at like property law, that goes back to like Blackstonian legal principles from the 1700s, right? So really, when we're looking at this, this is really a baby when it looks at the world and how we're moving forward. And this gets even more complicated when you're dealing with artificial intelligence. It gets more complicated whenever you talk about data at rest, data at transit. And it gets really complicated when you're dealing with things like encryption. Like kind of dating this particular recording, if you're looking at encryption, there's huge fights right now in the FBI in the United States and then also in the UK, where these law enforcement agencies are trying to convince Apple to hand over encryption keys so that the law enforcement agencies can gain access to people's sensitive data once they have a warrant. That's crazy, right? But these are the problems that we're going to go through. But we're going to focus on the area of cyber deception, right? And I'm going to give you a couple of different cases because I think it really helps set the stage for what we're actually working with on this. So this is Jerome Hackenkamp versus the United States of America. So this is kind of a weird story. There was a systems administrator that was attending, I think it was an InfraGard meeting. I might be wrong about that. But law enforcement notified this particular administrator at a university that there were attacks that appeared to be originating from the university's IP address space. Now, once again, due to network address translation, you get into some problems with how you deal with, tracing back the real IP address because everything's going to come from the IP address of the university. But they let this guy know. So this particular individual goes back to the university and starts doing his own research, right? And he's able to identify that the attacks appear to be coming from a couple of different IP addresses. When he starts digging in, he notices that the attacks run the IP address changes, the attacks run the IP address rate changes. It's all on the same subnet, and it all appears to be from the same switch. Further, he's able to identify that all of these attacks come from the exact same switch port, and these multiple IP addresses map back to the same MAC address, media access control address. So calls up law enforcement and is like, yo, law enforcement dudes, I'm paraphrasing. Once again, just to make it more interesting for everybody. Yo, law enforcement dudes, I found the attacker. I've got their dorm room. I'm going to go into their dorm room and I'm going to verify that this is the computer. Stop right there. Just stop right there. Quick question for everybody. Does a university have a right to just go into a student's dorm room? Let's think about that. You think they have a right to do that? Yeah, so here's the problem. Whenever you sign up and you go to a dorm room, the university has a clause in there that says that they have the ability to access your dorm at any time without notification for the purposes of maintenance and also safety of the students. And that actually makes sense, right? That actually makes some sense. Why? Let's say you have a sink in your dorm room and all of a sudden there's plumbing that breaks when you're not there. They should be able to access that dorm room. Health and wellness checks on students. Somebody's not responding. They should be able to enter the dorm room to check on the student. That's the way it's set up. And you'll see this a lot that leases for apartments have many of the exact same clauses. All right. So when we're looking at all of these things, him getting access to this dorm room isn't necessarily illegal. And also, is the systems administrator a member of law enforcement? Well, don't answer that question yet because you need to know the next part of the story, the next chapter, because we're just going to chill for the next episode. All right. So he's on the phone with the FBI. Yo, dudes, we've got the room. I'm going to go and I'm going to check it out. Law enforcement agent said, please, dear God, do not do that. Let us get a warrant and let's do it right. So he hears this from law enforcement. He's like, yeah, no. and he decides to ignore what law enforcement told him to do and go into the room because he was afraid that Jerome Hackenkamp would actually delete evidence. Ooh, that's getting bad. He logged into Jerome's computer system with a user ID and a password of temp because he didn't want to gain access to Jerome's account, but he wanted to log in. And yes, there was an account of the domain temp, password of temp. And he opened up a command prompt, confirmed the MAC address with IP config, logged out of the computer system and left the room. Now, was that evidence that he collected admissible in a court of law? Think about it. What do you guys think? Was that admissible? No, it was Jerome's computer that he logged into, right? Man, whenever I ask this question, I get a lot of people that say no, and a small percentage of people say yes. So in this particular case, the judge ruled that the evidence was admissible. Ruled that the evidence was admissible, and ruled that it was admissible for a couple of different things. One, Jerome Hackenkamp, when he signed on, said that the university could gain access to his room for the purposes of the safety of the students at the university. The other thing that the judge said is due to the exigency of the circumstances, means that possibly the data could have been deleted. There was an immediate need for them to get access to that data. Now, I personally disagree with this judge. And I would think that most people would personally disagree with this judge. But the final thing that the judge brought up is Jerome Hackenkamp's private data was not breached on this as well. All right. So what happened with not logging in and looking at Jerome's personal files, the administrator simply went in and checked the IP address and MAC address of the computer, and that was it. Right. The other thing to learn about this case, and probably I'm going to say is the most important thing about this case, is never defend yourself in court. Jerome Hackenkamp had a lawyer from the EFF. Her name is Jennifer Granick, and she is a phenomenal attorney and a great warrior for the EFF and digital rights and all of these things. And throughout this process, he fired her as his counsel and ended up spending months in prison because he didn't know how to deal with the lawsuits how to deal with the legal situations that were around him. So if you're looking at this case and you're thinking, well, this is a really bad call, if he fired his attorney, do you see how the judge kind of came to a bad conclusion? So keep that in mind more than anything. Don't ever defend yourself in court because that's bad. Here's another story, and another one. Because we the best music. A substitute teacher buys a stolen laptop. This is a great story. Now, this particular story is Susan Clements Jeffries. So she was a substitute teacher. She's doing substitute teacher things like, hey, class, we're going to watch Romeo and Juliet in class. Gets about 20 minutes into it and is like, oh, dear God, nudity, and has to shut it off. You know, like substitute teachers do, right? So one of her students comes up to her and says, you know, anytime anyone ever comes up to you and they do the over the shoulder look, there's nothing good coming from that, right? You know, it's bad, right? She had a student come up to her and said, hey, would you like to buy a computer? It's really cheap. She's like, I would like to know more about this computer that you have. It's an Apple MacBook. Okay. Where do we want to make this deal? I am not kidding you. They made the deal for the laptop computer at the bus stop. Something about that makes me happy, right? You know the computer's stolen. I know the computer's stolen. Everybody in this case knows the computer's stolen. She buys it anyway, and I want to say it was like $50. And she immediately takes this computer home and immediately starts cyber sexting her boyfriend on this computer. Now, this particular computer system had like LoJack software where they could track the computer, gain access to the computer. It's something called Absolute Software. Now, the school system that this computer was stolen from had that software installed on all their computers. And they were able to gain multiple access to multiple pictures of Susan Clements Jeffrey in various states of undress and sexual activity. So Susan Clements Jeffrey lawyers up, right? She lawyers up that her rights were violated. Now, that computer was not her computer system. It wasn't. But this is what Judge Walter Rice wrote. It is one thing to cause a stolen computer to report its IP address or geographical location in an effort to track it down. It is something entirely different to violate federal wiretapping laws by intercepting the electronic communications of the person using that stolen laptop. That's a bright, shiny line. What the judge in this case is saying is track the IP, track the geolocation, but you cannot cross the line, even if the person is breaking the law and a bad person. You cannot violate the privacy of that person. Let me repeat that. We can gain access to the IP address and geographical location. We cannot gain access to the private usage of the person, even if they're violating that law. Okay? This is a bright line because a lot of the stuff that we talk about from attribution is going to be getting IP addresses. We're going to talk about some tools that we've written that do geographical location for things as well, because we want to stay on this bright, shiny, happy line. And in this particular case, of course, Absolute Software settled out of court. So just because somebody's doing something bad to you does not give you the right to violate their rights. Okay? Next one. This one's older, but once again, we're dealing with very, very small legal timescales on this. So let's go ahead and start with this one. Let's set it up. So the year is 1999. And if you want to know just how awful my generation is, you need to go watch the documentary Woodstock 99. We're bad is what I'm saying. And I know there's people that'll be like, oh no, our generation's not that bad. Gen X forever. We had goatees. It's not forgivable. Or soul patches. Goatees are fine. Remember the little soul patches that everyone was wearing and like the baggy pants? And my generation gave you Limp Bizkit. You're welcome. And Creed and a bunch of those bands. Yeah. Oh my gosh, just bad. So in 1999, the World Trade Organization website had a DOS attack. Now, back then, there was a lot of riots and there were demonstrations against the WTO. Because at that point in 99, there was a lot of fear that large multinational corporations and oligarchies would take over the world and we'd be under their thumb for a number of different things. And it's a damn good thing that that never happened. Good to know, right? All right. So there was this group called E-Hippies. That was their little freaking name. And I just know that the E-Hippies probably were driving like their parents' BMWs while they were hanging out in Aspen. I don't know that. I'm just guessing that because everything I know about hippies, I've learned from the TV series Portlandia. But these E-Hippies were launching DDoS attacks against the World Trade Organization website. Now, Connexion reflected that attack back to the E-Hippies website. And this is back in the day when the hacking organizations literally had websites that they were hosting and brought that website down, right? Brought that website down. Now, the interesting thing about this case was that there was no real legal repercussions against Connexion or the World Trade Organization. And this kind of leads to, you're not going to run into a problem with some of these things. And you shouldn't be thinking about like, well, you know, I might do entrapment against a hacker in Estonia. No, they're not going to show up to court to deal with these things. In fact, the next best case associated with this goes back to the MSF court order, Microsoft court order, where they issued an ex parte injunction against the people that were running the Wolodeck botnet. Now, what's interesting about the Wolodeck botnet is those people were not in the United States. They did not have their own attorneys. They weren't going to show up court and just sit there and chit chat with lawyers and the judge in that particular case because they were criminals and they would be arrested. So because the court issued a restraining order against the Wolodeck botnet, it was incumbent upon the United States Marshals and Microsoft working with the US Marshals to execute that court order, and a number of other people as well. So what they did is they took they just basically took over their domains, but they also took other technical measures to degrade the botnet. Basically, Microsoft was gaining access to these computer systems without direct permission and removing the botnet from a number of different computer systems that were out there. All right. So let's take a second and let's kind of take this apart a little bit and how this ties into historical legal precedent. I'm going to look at maritime law. According to international maritime law, you can open fire on two different groups of people without a declaration of war. What are those two groups of people? You're cruising in your boat. You got your flippy floppies. You know, you're hanging out with T-Pain, right? Pirates. A lot of people would say pirates. Pirates are the easy one because I am a scurvy pirate. Yep. Pirates. Some people would say Nazis. Not correct. Not true. Nope. Not true. Not that one. Let's think about this. We got pirates. What are the like most despicable people that would be on the seven seas? Yar. Slave traders. Slave traders. Now, every once in a while, you have people be like, well, that seems old. No, there's more slaves in the world today than there was in the 1800s. That got dark real quick. So the reason why this is so important is let's focus on pirates, okay? If you're looking at pirates, if I open fire on a pirate ship, okay? Did the pirate go to a yacht club and buy that ship? Like, did they show up and they're like, I think we need the 45-footer, matey. And like, do we need the glass bottom? Of course we do. I don't know pirate names, right? It's stolen. So if I sink a pirate ship, does the original owner of that ship have a legal ability to sue me for their lost property that was stolen from them? No, they don't. So whenever I'm working with SIPRI, the Stockholm Institute for Peace, and we're talking about international laws and we're having these conversations, when we're talking about, especially with computer systems, there's a lot of conversation around if someone's computer system is being used by a hacking group, is that actually their computer system anymore? Or should we be treating those computer systems like pirate confiscated ships? Okay. So Microsoft never had any charges brought against them. Nothing bad happened to Microsoft. It's just they did what they did under court order, right? A lot of this also kind of comes back to your warning banner, where you're specifically going to call out what it is you're going to do once somebody accesses the system that you have. Think about this. A lot of those logon scripts for VPNs, they'll do geolocation checks. A lot of those VPNs will do checks to make sure that antivirus is up to date. They'll make sure that your patching is up to date. They'll validate the host name, validate that it's associated with the domain, validate the user. They'll do a lot of checks on a computer system. And it turns out, whether we're dealing with OpenVPN scripts or starting in Windows 2008, they had network access protection. A lot of those exact same checks will also be helpful for attributing who an attacker is that's trying to break into your environment. Also, look at your intellectual property and how this relates to the wide world and the universe around us. Callbacks. If we create a file or something that does callbacks, how is that any different than software updates? Think about it. On your computer, every piece of software that you download on your computer system is constantly calling back to the manufacturer, right? To the software developer. Microsoft does the Microsoft Genuine Advantage. Think about tracking on your phone. The absolute horrible privacy nightmare that is the cell phone community today is tracking you constantly. Like, does a chess app really need to gain access to my call list and my call history? Your phone is tracking you like thousands of times an hour. Whenever you go and you try to get coffee somewhere, like delicious Brewberry coffee in Sturgis, South Dakota, whenever you're going and you're trying to find this place, you're going to look and you're going to be like, nope, not going to flyover country. When you're going and you're looking for your coffee, it's tracking you all the time. So why don't we track things in much the same way that normal legitimate apps do? Like we can create a Word document that as soon as it's opened, it loads a hidden element from a server that we control. Emails. Every time you open up emails that you get in spam or a lot of just legitimate emails, they have images that are loaded on another website and they're tracking who's opening up their emails based on who's accessing those images at that time in those emails, right? So we don't really have to hack per se. We're moving into what many people would call canary tokens. We're simply creating different types of evidence and things that'll call back. How can these things go wrong? Mistakes and unintended consequences absolutely can be a problem, right? You don't ever want to make malware that is persistent level access easily accessible. We had a case that we were working a number of years ago where we had somebody that was threatening to kill the customers via poison of a particular manufacturer. And we wanted to create something on the website in a certain place that we would try to get the attacker, was a disgruntled former employee, to come to, and we'd be able to track that malicious actor. We created the files, we created the instructions, gave it to our customer, and we said, insert this on a fake employee portal. We were going to try to get the employee who was complaining about how they were fired to go to the employee portal and put in a request through the appropriate mechanisms. And instead of following our instructions, they put that tracking software on the main website, and they had thousands of hits. And when they came to us, they're like, which of these is actually the malicious attacker? They didn't follow our instructions at all. That's going wrong, right? Never, ever do Venom. Never do a full attack on an IP address. Don't crash systems. Don't do persistent long-term access on an attacker's computer systems. This is all about having a number of options, right? We've got annoyance, we're in attribution, we're going to move into attack as well. So if we're looking at the hallmarks of legality, what are the things that we think have to be in place to make sure that we're not violating the law in the actions that we are taking? We need to discuss what we are doing. We need to go through and have conversations. We need to document what we are doing. We need to come up with a plan, consult with others. We don't want to hide. If you're in a new area of law and you're hiding what you're actually doing, the judges and the courts and the juries will take that as though you knew what you were doing was wrong, and they're going to hold you accountable for it. Also, don't be evil. I know that being evil to bad people sounds like a really, really good time, right? You know, we love seeing the villain get their comeuppance. That's one of our favorite things in media and in the news. When you finally see justice served, it is a delightful thing. Don't be evil. Don't violate the law to get back against what you consider to be bad or lawbreakers. You need to not become them. Remember, we have ethics that we have to follow as well. Oops, there it is. All right, editors, it appears my slides have frozen. I need to write a song on turning it off and on again. All right. Now, you're going to be dealing with anonymization networks, right? You might be dealing something like Tor. And this is one of the few public cases that I can talk about. This is the Capital One attack where we had Thompson, her name, she went by Erratic. And she was attacking, she was going through Amazon, gaining access to resources through a proxy. And she was going through anonymization, which is great. Good for her. I think that's fantastic. Oops. But the problem was she was also going on Slack and she was talking about it with her friends and on Twitter direct messages with her friends. And this gets into like really, really, really a lot of attackers are just dumb and they make mistakes. Now, Erratic wasn't stupid. She was just really mentally off. And she would put in things like, I want to get this secret information off my server. That's why I'm archiving all of it. It's all encrypted. I just don't want it around. I basically strapped myself with a bomb vest, effing dropping Capital One's docs and admitting it. I want to distribute these buckets. I think first there are social security numbers, full names, and dates of birth. My point on this is if you're an attacker and you're going through all of the effort, all of these efforts to try to go through and hide your tracks, don't go on Twitter direct messages or Slack and admit your crimes, right? Now, we have some people that bring up arguments, and I think that there's a valid argument. At some point, we should be able to shoot back. Like, cop gets into a shootout, killing is wrong, but you have the right to neutralize the threat. Remember, when we're talking about analogies we're talking about taking someone's life don't apply in this space, right? The big problem that you have with these types of conversations, let's say Capital One wanted to attack back. Maybe Thompson wasn't actually going through her own personal computer. Maybe she was going through someone else's computer. What if that computer was a radiology machine in Europe that was directly connected to the internet? And if you attacked that system and you brought it down, there would be consequences, not just radiology. Let's say it's SCADA, ICS. It's a dam control system. It's a water control system controlling the amount of chlorine. We have to be careful about these things, right? And that liability can come and get you. But let's get back to the attribution because that's fun. All right. We need to get some level of attribution. Just give me a second. Sorry, had to go blow my nose, which totally is not on the bingo card, by the way. Totally not. All right. So with attribution, we want to get the bad guys, right? And you got to understand that when you're dealing with nation states, getting the bad guys is kind of difficult because many of them have diplomatic immunity, right? And so why would we actually do this? Well, there's a couple of reasons. One, if we're doing attribution correctly, especially if we're running something like Keepo, we might get a better understanding of what they're actually after, right? Also, we would like to know what is it that the attacker already has. And it'll help us design better defenses and better understand how much we need to allocate in different parts of our defensive approaches. So if we're trying to deal with Tor, how can we get that attacker to give up their real location? Now, there's a great presentation by Ron Gulo from a long time ago where he was talking about detecting pen testers. And one of the things that Ron talked about was how attackers, like malicious attackers and pen testers, don't share the same TTPs, right? Look, Ron is a very confident dude. I have people that maybe they don't like Ron. I've had good experiences with him and his wife over the years, and they've actually been to my house. But Ron is very, 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 I guess, confident in his opinions, which is great because I don't have that problem at all. Just look at the level of humility that I show whenever I'm talking about the OSI model. All right, moving right along. All right, so if somebody's coming at you through Tor, an attacker will do that. Your general pen testers won't. Most of the time. Now, we do some obfuscation stuff where we bounce off of cloud services, but that's a whole nother conversation. There's always some level of indirection, but the actual indirection may be different, right? It may be different based on what it is a pen tester is doing and what it is a real hacker is doing. But we need to come up with techniques to be able to deal with that in both scenarios. Let's talk a little bit about how Tor works, right? With Tor, you have Alice. Alice is going to connect into an entry node in a Tor network. Now, they've reduced the number of connections in this EFF diagram to make it more simplistic, but the concept is still the same. And every Tor node that you go through is encrypted from link to link to link. It's literally just handing off these connections, obfuscating the circuit that's created until it hits an exit node. An exit node is possibly unencrypted, and all of the traffic appears to come from that exit node. Now, the other thing that's interesting about Tor is once it establishes a circuit, it continues to use that circuit until it degrades, and then it'll reestablish a new circuit through the Tor network. Now, a couple of notes on Tor. Is Tor what you would call spunky? Is it fast? Is it zippy? Is it crisp? Yeah, it's really not. It's really not a fast way to surf the internet. Now, also, if we're looking at Tor, if you're trying to be safe and not like tracked where you are, should you just surf through Tor with a general web browser with all the JavaScript and all the different plugins and everything in your browser all fired up? No, you shouldn't. In fact, if you're surfing through Tor, a lot of the different Tor browsers have stripped back a tremendous amount of functionality in what they have and what that browser can do to protect the user, right? Now, when you're looking at this, right, when you're looking at this, this actually means that the attacker is going to restrict the total attack surface available to them. So if I'm trying to attack your website and I'm shutting off all of these different types of like plugins and JavaScript libraries, that means a lot of that stuff that exists on the website will not be attackable by me, by the attacker. So keep that in mind. They're going to run slower and the overall attack surface is going to be reduced for them. So if you're looking at all of these different things, when you're adding this up, all of a sudden their attack time goes way up and their attackable surface goes down. That's a good thing. So if we're forcing all these attackers to use things like Tor, that's pretty solid. Now, how would an attacker use Tor? Well, just for the record, many times wrong. It's very, very common where an attacker tries to use Tor and send their attacker tools through it, but a lot of times they don't know how their tools work and they don't know how Tor works, right? So you can set up a SOCKS proxy, like a SOCKS 5 proxy with proxy chain or a Tor SOCKS. I like that. And we can set that up and we can run our data through it, but does it actually go through it? Let's say they want to run a Nessa scan through Tor. Could you do that? Could you run Metasploit through it? Could you run Nmap through it? If you do it right, the worst thing that happens for the attackers, it's really, really slow. It's a very, very slow process of trying to do anything through Tor. And if you're running thousands of vulnerability checks through it, that ain't going to end well for that attacker. It's going to take forever. However, it's very rare for attackers to actually set it up properly. So let's say I run a port scan through a Tor proxy, and it's going to ping. And Nmap by default does 4 types of pings, 1, 2, 3, 4 types of pings to start. We're going to go through these. Now, whenever you turn on a proxy and you're running Tor and you're running through some type of SOCKS proxy, that proxy is going to wrap the TCP connect function on that application. And it's going to basically wrap it and redirect it through. So it has to go through TCP connect. So if we're looking at this first one right here where it says ICMP echo request, is that ICMP echo request going to go through TCP connect? ICMP echo request, is that going to go through TCP connect? Think about it. Yeah, no, it's not, because it's not a TCP protocol, right? That means ICMP timestamp request is not going to go through it either to ICMP. Now, the next one, this one's a little bit more difficult. It's an ACK packet or an ACK ping, right? If it's an ACK packet, is that going to go through TCP connect? Any takers? Is that ACK packet going to go through TCP connect? ACK is part of TCP IP. SYN, SYNACK, ACK, FIN, FINACK. Actually, no, it's not. Because if I send something through TCP Connect, what is the first packet that is sent through TCP Connect? First packet is a SYN, which brings me to this last one that I'm talking about right here. A SYN packet, is that going to go through TCP Connect? Finally, after all these, is that finally going to go through TCP Connect? The answer is no. Not a single one of these packets will go through TCP Connect. Not one. Not a single one. Why? Quick to the command line. All right. So let me zoom in here real quick. Let's do man nmap. Oh, I don't have nmap on this system. I'm not going to start up my VM. It's going to take me a second to get installed. But the point is, whenever you're running nmap as root, not a single one of the packets goes through TCP Connect. Not a single one of the packets goes through TCP Connect. I don't have nmap installed on my host system. That's why I didn't do it. Not a single one of those packets goes through TCP Connect because nmap does raw TCP socket access. Raw TCP socket access. The only way that you make nmap run, oh, wait a minute. You know what I've got? I may not have a command prompt, but I do, hold on. I do have a browser. So let's go to the man pages for nmap. Let's go man nmap. Go to Linux man page. We do a control F and we look for -ST, right? And space. There we go. So a TCP Connect scan right here, it explains how the TCP Connect function works. And it says that nmap by itself, just running as root, is going to do raw socket access. And when you do the lowercase s capital T, it does full TCP Connect access through the core operating system libraries. So if we're looking at this, none of these packets are going to go through. In fact, none of these packets with an S scan or a stealth scan are going through either because it's making raw TCP socket access. Now, how likely is this? I see this happen all the time. If you ever see an attacker that's trying to break into your environment and they're running really high rates of speed, they're coming from a real IP address. They're not bouncing through Tor. They may be obfuscating something else like McDonald's, right? Or like Hilton or Lowe's or Walmart. They may be going through something like that, but they're not using Tor. They're not using Tor. The first time that I ever saw this, was I want to say it was at DEF CON in 2007 or 2008. It was the DEF CON that one of the Mythbusters was there, and I did a panel discussion on cyber warfare. But when the presentation that I was sitting in, it was like 500-600 people in the room. Somebody was showing how to run port scans and attacks through Tor, and they were running a scan against Microsoft.com through Tor. They ran the scan. It came back like 14 seconds later, and everybody was applauding, and I'm sitting there going, that ain't right. That ain't right at all. That's wrong. Like, that doesn't seem right. And everybody's like, woo, good job. You're scanning Microsoft through Tor. You're so smart. Yay. And I'm like, something's wrong. So I went back to the lab again and I tried to do it and I got the exact same results. It ran and it ran really quickly because when I ran this command, I did proxy chains nmap and I gave it the IP address and it didn't work because even if you're running proxy chains, nmap is going to go through and it's going to do raw socket access, even if it's invoked with proxy chains. All right. So if you want to do this the right way with tools, you need to go through and do proxy chains, which is going to wrap nmap. You're going to say, don't ping, because any of those pings are going to go straight through raw TCP socket access. If you go through and do lowercase s, you're telling nmap to run the scan through the TCP Connect function. And then you give it each of the ports that you're interested in, and it's going to take forever to do that. All right, now we're going to talk about honey tokens, right? Now we're going to talk about honey tokens, and we're going to get into our lab coming up here in just a little bit. All right, so we're going to be using the Canary tokens website, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit, but you're going to go through in this lab and you're literally going to play with the tokens that are in Canary tokens, and we're going to see which of them fire. Now, some of them can take a while to generate the logs back to you, notifying you that it did in fact fire. So some of you get results fairly quick. Some of these take a little bit longer for them to fire. So just bear with the website. It's a free resource. We're going to be throwing like, I don't know, a couple hundred people. I don't know how many people we have on YouTube. We got 138 here on Zoom. We're going to be sending a lot of people through, which is going to be kind of crazy and it kind of bogs the system down. But just Giving you a heads up, be patient on that. But when it works and you get the email that I think is awesome, you'll get like, what is the token name, the message that you had associated with it, the IP address associated with it, and what the user agent string is. And sometimes it'll even go so far as to try to map where that source IP address is. All right. So when you're doing Canary tokens, let's actually do the Canary tokens lab right now. So we're going to go to Canary tokens. I didn't need to close that out. Let me do this. Let's go to canarytokens.org. And you have a number of Canary tokens, and you have to set up these Canary tokens. And a lot of these are done by a friend of mine, Casey Smiths or Sub T, who worked at Thinkist. He's left Thinkist. He's moving on, doing his own thing, doing some subcontracting and things of that nature. But we have Word Web Bug, we have DNS, we have credit cards, QR codes, Log4Shell, a fake app, AWS key, MySQL. The main ones that you should look at would be like a Word document and an Excel spreadsheet if you have a copy of Word and Excel that you can use. Custom binary, JavaScript clone website. When we go through this, I'm going to show you that one, like how much I love JavaScript clone website and the CSS cloned website, a WireGuard VPN config, just awesome, awesome, awesome stuff that you can play with. A lot of these maybe require a third-party app, but the big ones I'd recommend you look at be like a Word doc, Excel spreadsheet, and I would recommend you also look at a cloned website on that as well. So let's go ahead and we're going to have this. It's going to take us up to and through the break. So we're going to have 20 minutes on this. So 20 minutes to do this lab. And when we come back, we're going to walk through what do we actually get from our Canary tokens. And as you're getting the responses from Canary tokens, post it in. Some of you will get responses right away. It may take you a little while because we do actually overload the Canary tokens website from time to time. So it's what happens. We call it the BHIS hug of death. So basically the lab, we got a link there, but basically the lab is play with it. Just play with it. All right, so let's get rolling. If you need any assistance, please let us know and we'll resume in 20 minutes. All right, let's go through this and talk about some of these. So a lot of these are pretty basic, like a web bug. If it gets scraped or access, it triggers things of that nature. Some of my favorites, though, I want to talk through use cases for some of them and just why they're so awesome. The first one I want to talk about is AWS keys. If you put in your like email, I'll just put in my email and put in like that. It's going to create this token that is an S3 bucket key, right? So you're going to have these access keys. You can import this into tools like FileZilla. You can import this into tools like S3 Explorer. But the use case for this is to put it out on a GitHub repository somewhere where an attacker that's crawling around and doing recon in your organization, they find a GitHub repository, maybe in an internal GitHub repository, and they see these access keys and they're totally going to grab these access keys and they're totally going to try to use them. So I absolutely love this one. This one's really cool. We've gotten a lot of value out of that one. This next one is really interesting. I don't have a lab for it yet because I never could get it. Well, I did get it to work, but I can't get it to work consistently. So you can create a process to monitor, and it says, okay, like what about K-list? We'll just do their recommendation, right? And what happens is if an attacker runs that executable at all, it will send an email in. So you can be like, just put that in like that. And it literally creates a reg file that updates your registry so that anytime anyone ever accesses it, let's see, open up a text editor. There we go. This is what the registry key looks like right here. That doesn't look right. It looks to me like it's broken again. But yeah, this is one of the reasons why I don't do this one. Token fires for both 32s. Yeah, well, at any rate, I don't know why it didn't have the whole, this is it right here. Okay, there we go. Now I got it. There it is. So if I go ahead and open up this file, right, I'm going to open it up with the text editor. This is what it looks like. Okay. Phew, I'm glad it worked. All right. So this is what it actually looks like. So it creates a registry key that monitors the process. If anyone ever starts cmd.exe and they run that specific executable, it's going to make a call out to the Canary tokens website with this unique string right here. And this unique string is associated with your specific Canary token. Excuse me. So very, very cool little Canary token as well. Keeping on down the pipe, fake file system can do that one. Let's spend a couple of seconds. Let's talk about Word docs and Excel spreadsheets. For a number of you, the Word doc didn't fire. And that could be for a couple of reasons. One of the main reasons is I think we overloaded the Canary token site. Don't be surprised if you get the fire like later on tonight, like it all of a sudden does its thing. Yeah, as we've had people point out in the past, it's like the BHIS hug of death happens. The other thing that happens with this is something called mark of the web. If you download a Word document, it has any types of macros in it, because it will, your Windows system for protection will put this thing called mark of the web on it. And it means that it was downloaded from the internet and it will not fire macros. And I'm going to show you a little bit later how to do this where macros are not needed. So there'll be no macros at all on it. Now, mark of the web, let's kind of walk through this here. Mark of the web means it was downloaded through a browser. If you do this and you put it on a workstation, let's say that you think a workstation is compromised, right? You're going to put this set up on a workstation that you think is compromised. You're going to drop a doc that is irresistible for the attacker. What would be an irresistible file name for a hacker? Like they see this document, they're going to open the document. Candygram, Landshark, totally not passwords.doc, right? And the attacker will grab that totally irresistible file and they're going to download it through their tool. Now, whenever you download a file through a hacker tool, it does not put the mark of the web on the Word document. Once again, mark of the web is used whenever somebody downloads a file from the internet. If they download the file directly through their tool, it does not put the mark of the web on it, which is pretty cool. Custom exe binary, you just take an executable of your choosing and you upload that executable and it backdoors that executable that every time that executable fires, it's going to do a callback to you. So what do you think would be a good name for an executable? Hostconfig.exe, vpn.exe, something like that. So as soon as they run that executable, it fires. Another one of my all-time favorites is this. I'm going to put in a domain of bhis.co, like that. I'm going to put in an email. I'm just going to put in my work email. And then I'm going to put in JS clone fired. If I could type, that would be awesome. There we go. And I create the token. Now, this is awesome. Whenever an attacker is trying to spearfish your organization, one of the first things that they do is they'll try to clone a page with a user ID and a password field in an effort to try to get somebody to come to that site and enter in their user ID, their password, and their two-factor authentication. Evil Jinx and a bunch of tools do this. That's the way they work. Attackers do this all of the time. What this does, and what this JavaScript says, if I can zoom in on it, is it looks at the JavaScript and it says, okay, if I'm firing on a domain bhis.co, I'm done. Okay, it's over. However, if I'm not on a bhis.co website, then I need to go and pull down this file or this image right here from Canary Token's website. So if it fires from your real website, it's not going to trigger. If it doesn't trigger from your website, it is going to trigger this callback. And think about what happens. The attacker clones your website. They grab all of the JavaScript on that website. And in grabbing the JavaScript on that website, they then rebuild the website for spear phishing purposes. And they usually do this in a completely automated way. And I'm going to get to that here in just a couple of seconds. And as soon as that website fires up, it triggers this. And now you have identified the attacker before they've sent a single spearfish into your organization. Yesterday, I was talking about threat intel and how we are always acquiring threat intel from an attack that happened on someone else's website, someplace else, a long, long, long ago, and a long ways away from us, right? With this is threat intel that somebody is attacking your website right now. And at BHIS, when people are doing these types of attacks against us, we are automatically shunning their spearphishing websites before a single spearfish comes into our environment. So one of the things you can do is you can go to a JavaScript obfuscators. Excuse me. And you can, sorry about that. And I should mention editors, I coughed. All right. So you can import your JavaScript into a site like this, and then it can automatically obfuscate your JavaScript. And if you go to a number of these different sites, there's a bunch of them out there. Some of these websites will automatically trigger the JavaScript as part of their obfuscation. So I kind of like to go through some of these and kind of the lab that I had you work on. Oh, wow. This is the first military grade JavaScript obfuscator. Ooh, folks, the military grade. Hold on. We got a badass here. Just for the record, anybody that's actually been in the military, when they see military grade, they usually get very, very afraid of anything that is actually military grade. In short, military grade means nothing to anybody that has actually been in the military. Let's go. I want to go to the JavaScript obfuscator. All right, we got a bunch of them. So I fired off a bunch of them, and it's also built in to that specific Canary. You can click obfuscate this token, and they'll automatically obfuscate it as well for you. All right. So you can track that. So now if I manage the token, let's see if anybody fired it on that. It doesn't look like it's been triggered yet. So I think we actually, I think we actually fried the Canary tokens website on that. Oops. That's fun. But really just a lot of super cool stuff that really kind of gets you inside of that threat curve of the attackers. Now, as I mentioned, we tend to overload the Canary tokens website when I teach this class. I was hoping today we wouldn't do that. But let's say you don't want to go through their website. Let's say that hypothetically you think that a beacon coming off of an attacker's computer system that automatically is going back to canarytokens.net might be a little obvious, maybe a little too on the nose for the attacker. You can totally clone the entire GitHub repository with a few configuration changes and some DNS settings. You can make it so it's not running on canarytokens.net. You can stand it up on any server and any domain of your choosing. Now, we talked about this in the section not getting shot and why it's important to not get shot, because it is truly important to not get shot. I recommend setting up a domain that looks like gibberish, because most people that go to websites that look like gibberish, or they see their system going to a gibberish website, they tend to think it's an advertising website. So if you could be like A100 or A1001.net, something like that. I'm sure that that is an actual domain, but it's probably an advertising domain, to be honest. But coming up with something that you think looks and acts and smells like an advertising domain would work great. And then you put up your own Canary token server. You have the DNS records pointing at your Canary token server, and you don't have to worry about leveraging a third-party service at all. So the setup is simple, right? The setup is absolutely dead simple to use. This is the executable. It's one that I created. I called it Free Candy. And as soon as somebody runs it, it executes, and that's fun. You could also make it real. OpenVPN, as an example, has the capability of executing scripts as part of the config. So within the config, you can say, I want you to execute PowerShell, and I want you to execute PowerShell scripts. Or on Unix-based systems, Mac-based systems, I want you to execute Python script. Or On Windows systems, we want you to execute things directly from the command line. So you can put your VPN config someplace like no index, no follow VPN configs, and you can have the attackers execute their VPN configs. And when they do, you can run anything you want on that attacker's computer system, right? Yeah, sometimes people will look at this and be like, wait a minute, hold on. You mean OpenVPN can run PowerShell? Oh, it can run PowerShell, Python, and command line from Windows. Now, don't get too crazy, right? Like, we don't want to start nuking systems. It would be bad if we just RM, RF, like all the files on a system. That would be bad. That would be bad. But if we could dump the wireless profiles from that system, that wouldn't be illegal. I'm just checking your wireless profiles to make sure that you have legit wireless profiles associated with our corporation, right? If I just ran, let's say I did traceroute from the attacker's computer system to my computer system, right? Get that traceroute path. So pretty cool, right? So we can do that. We can execute that. Now, the question that I get a lot is this against the law? Depends on what you do. It depends on what you do. If you're simply getting geolocation and IP address information to track systems that are connecting into your environment, no, it's not illegal. Remember, we have the law. If you're doing persistent access and you're trying to dump personal files, yes, you are violating the law. You are violating the law. So be careful what you're doing and try to stick within the bounds of what you would need to do to validate a system's security before allowing them in. So how would you do this? Well, I mentioned NetSH WLAN show networks mode equals BSSID. We can do that, right? I can get location information by just having the user dump the wireless networks around this computer. I can put it on a page that is set up with robots.txt that I'm telling normal users to never go to. I would create a page like VPN config, right? Somebody would see that as an attacker. They're absolutely going to go to that directory VPN config, but your users aren't going to go to VPN config. They're going to pull down those VPN configs and they're going to try to run them. And most of the time, they won't even bother reading the script, right? Cloned websites, I talked about this one. This is the one that we run at BHIS, and I want to explain like how wireless profiles work just a little bit. So whenever you dump the wireless configurations of the wireless signals of all the systems around your computer system, it's doing kind of an overlapping fields of visibility of where those things actually exist. So if my computer system sees 4 different wireless networks, what Google is going to try to do is to find the point where each of those wireless networks overlap each other. And how is Google, for the record, how is Google mapping all of the wireless networks that are out there? How is Google doing this? How do they do this? Like, you got an open API that you can query. Yeah. Your phones, Google Maps, they are constantly being tracked. And we are feeding this data, our geolocation information, the wireless access point information. We are feeding this data continuously to Google. And Google and Apple, well, maybe them too, mainly them too, I mean, they're tracking all of this and they're getting more and more accurate telemetry constantly. I mentioned I've done nation state level things. We can get geolocation with people out in the middle of Afghanistan because they have phones, because they have cell towers, and because they have wireless access points, right? They are tracking everything everywhere all at once. So when we have our stuff trigger, this is an example trigger for BHIS. It actually doesn't look like this anymore. With our triggers, we now have them go directly into our Elastic cluster. So we see this differently now, but this is just some of the data that we get. This is somebody that was trying to attack BHIS. This is a group that was setting up a spear phishing campaign a number of years ago against BHIS, where we had a whole bunch of users that were triggering all of these different wireless triggers. They were triggering these Canary tokens. They were triggering the website scraping token. They were firing all of these different tokens all over the place. And we were able to track all of them. We were able to ban their spearphishing domain and their IP addresses before they even launched a spearfish. And that's awesome. So I want to talk about Word docs because some of you, Word docs didn't work, right? Because of Mark of the Web. Some of them, it didn't work because, in all honesty, I think we brought down the Canary tokens website. I'm going to have to get a hold of Haroon and talk to him about that. But that's a whole nother conversation I need to have with Canary. But Word docs, we can make it work in something other than Word. Because some of you were like, hey, this only works in Microsoft Office. I tried running it in LibreOffice and it didn't work. It's like South Park. This monkey has only one butt. It's of no use to me. This only works in Microsoft Office. It's of no use to me whatsoever. Stick with me because we're going to get better. By the way, I do have a dream of completely redoing Dr. Seuss with nothing but cyber deception, like green eggs and ham. Would you run it from a share? Could you run it from a chair? Would you run it from Tor? If the FBI comes, would you open your door? And I'm pretty sure I'm lucky I haven't been sued by Dr. Seuss yet for that. So I want to show you Word documents and we're going to talk about resolution because what is the problem with doing geolocation based on IP address? I want you to take a couple of seconds. Think about that. If I'm trying to geolocate you by IP address, is that really accurate geolocation? It's not real super accurate. It ain't. Or is it? So this is some of my favorite slides I have ever done. This is the last presentation I gave at the last DerbyCon that was ever happened. The last presentation at the last DerbyCon. And I was staying with my brother, who's our director of sales at DerbyCon. And I got this idea in the middle of the night and I woke him up and I'm like, dude, open it, open it, open it. And it's something like 3 o'clock in the morning when I do my best work, by the way. And I finally convinced him. And it's awesome when you're like working with your brother and I'm a big brother and I'm his boss. Like, that's awesome. Have you ever thought about just how awesome that is and how miserable it must be for him? Because I can literally make him get up and he can never, ever tell me, dude, you're not the boss of me, because I am the boss of him. All right. Anyway, so we have this set up. I told him to open up the document. He opened it. He fired it. I got a source IP address. All right. I got the source IP address and I got the IP address of 74.143.15.100. And it put the location of where my brother was here in Louisville, Kentucky. That's a problem. That sucks. We were actually up over here in the O of Louisville. By the way, I love Louisville. If you get downtown Louisville, there's a great big sign in one of the stores that's like how to properly pronounce Louisville. And it's like Louisville, 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 Louisville. And they have them all in neon and they say all are correct. And I love the people of Louisville and I love the fact that they do that because, you know, you get into these places like you're pronouncing it wrong and Louisville is just happy you're there, to be honest with you. All right. But I got this problem. You see, I've got these problems where that pin is way far away from where I was and where my brother was. Okay. How do I do better? Here's my thought. My thesis when I gave this presentation was my IP address of where I was coming from the hotel was not going to be accurate. It wasn't going to be accurate at all. But let's back up for a second. Let's talk about why it's not accurate. Most ISPs have endpoint IP addresses that they hand out via DHCP, Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol. So you fire up your edge router, it runs, it gets a randomly assigned IP address. Why would an ISP go through the work, through the effort to try to geolocate every single IP address of what they connect, right? That's a lot of work and it's unnecessary and there wouldn't be a lot of value in it. Now, to be fair, if you get a warrant, they can. If you go and get a warrant, you get IP address, source port, date, timestamp, the triple of those three things with a warrant, they can tell you exactly who the subscriber was that had access to that specific IP address. What is the address of that router with a warrant, but they don't publish that information, and they wouldn't, right? That puts people at risk. So instead, they throw all of their DHCP IP addresses in a great big pool, and they geolocate them all back to the same POP location. All right. But if you trace route and you take one step back, the IP address of the hotel was right here, 74, 143, 15, 100. And that one's IP address location is crap, right? It's just not good. But if you go back one IP address to 74, 142, 115, 130, what is that IP address? What is that IP address right before the hotel? Think about it. What do we think it is? That's the edge router facing the hotel. So you have the router, then you have the hotel's router, and this router, the second to last, is owned by the ISP, and it geolocated us less than a block. We were here at the Hyatt, and this is the location it put us at. That's actually pretty darn good geolocation. We're no longer in a city or a state. I'm within a block, half a block of where the actual attacker was. That's some good squishy right there. So once again, we have all this stuff recorded. Just anytime you can come back to it as well. There's no radius around that either. That is where that edge router is. If you're trying to wonder, what is this pin? If you walked to this block, you went to right there, you would see one of those green boxes. That would be the ISP's POP right there. Pretty cool. All right, there we go. Now people are just like, I'm getting hungry. Me too. I am as well. If you're looking at downtown Louisville and you're like, does that place have good food? Yes. Yes, they do. All right, let's keep going. But one of the problems with Word docs and them beaconing back is they may not work with all Word processors, right? Like especially the ones that come out of Canary tokens. Those are very Microsoft specific Word documents, very, very Microsoft specific. So if you want something that is more compatible, we have a project called Word Web Bugs. This is created by Ethan Robish of Black Hills Information Security, and it has a lot more flexibility. So let's go through and we already did the Canary tokens. Let's go ahead and let's talk about Canary tokens. So in this particular kind of background, the first time I ever used this capability, it was used in a tool called Core Impact. And I was flying into Atlantic City. I had an HTCIA conference that I was presenting at, which, by the way, I remember distinctly was the first time I ever presented, and I had porn displayed on the video projector for all the attendees to see. Likely story, but I was working a forensics investigation, and it was one of those forensics investigations. It wasn't an illegal porn investigation. It was basically a timesheet fraud where someone was surfing a lot of porn at work. By the way, they had a web proxy, and this particular individual was going to Wikipedia and was doing looking up topics in Wikipedia for porn. By the way, if you want to know if you have a problem in life, and you want to know if you've hit rock bottom, if you're going to Wikipedia to get your porn fix, I'm just going to throw this out there. You might have a problem. All right. You might just have an issue. And I remember this case, this particular case for a number of reasons. One, it happened at this conference. And two, I remember the city manager that I was working with was like, oh my God, this has got to be like the worst thing you've ever encountered. I'm like, dude, it's the Wikipedia article for vagina. I mean, no. And he goes, what have you seen that's worse than this? 4 minutes later, he was crying and he asked, why did you tell me that? Yeah, if you work in security, you're going to come across some things. And I have people periodically that take these classes and they're like, why is he talking about porn? I never. Oh, look, if you have a problem with porn, I'm just going to throw this out there. Computer security is not the field for you. Just saying. All right. So that's not the whole story. The whole story is I landed in Atlantic City super late. and I got into my hotel. I want to say it was like 2 o'clock in the morning. And I got a phone call from some friends of mine in law enforcement. And what had happened is we had a case that we were working where a girl that was 9 years old had been kidnapped. And they wanted to know if there was any hacker things that I could think of that we could use to try to get the girl back. And we bounced a bunch of ideas off, and we came up with the idea of creating Word Web Bug. And at that time, we were using Core Impact. By the way, I didn't pull the trigger. I did not hit enter on this. I was an advisor, and I had them do it. And we set up Core Impact. We set up the config. We created a Word document because we were in communication with a friend of his who was actually a family member, and he was in communication with the suspect, and they were communicating over Skype. Now, if you remember years ago before Microsoft acquired Skype, like if you went in with a warrant for anything, they would tell you to pound sand. If you went to them and said, hey, we have a child that's been abducted, they would say, nope, not helping you. If you went in and said, we got terrorists, they're going to bomb something, they would say, nope, not helping you. But we knew this person was using Skype. We knew that this person was communicating with a family member. So we created a Word Web Bug, and the family member on our behalf sent him this document, said, there is a warrant out for your arrest. Here's a newspaper article. And he put it all in a Word document and sent it to him via Skype. He opened it, and we got the holy triplicate, right? We got the source IP address, date timestamp, and we got the source port. And once again, if you have that, then you go and get a warrant, or we already had a warrant and we were working with the local ISPs. You can track where that specific router was. So we set this up, we had it going, we fired it off. He opened it, and almost probably within an hour, he opened up the document, and we got his location with the warrant, and we got the girl back. Now, there are times, by the way, where people will try to say to me, it's like, well, what about additional warrants? Did you need a warrant for the place? And it was at a hotel in Kansas City, I believe, is where we got them back, or got the girl back. Understand that with a lot of this stuff, when you're dealing with warrants and you're dealing with these types of things, whether or not it's legal or not legal, takes a second seat to the number one priority. And everybody, what is the number one priority? Number one, get the girl back. Right? So, like I said, I worked with a number of people in law enforcement. I was an advisor. We set this up. They were the ones that hit enter, and they sent it. So they're just absolutely amazing. But we were able to get that level of tracking. I'll tell you another story I don't tell very often. Another kidnapping story that we worked in. So this particular story, once again, I was an advisor, like these people that I work with. And a lot of times in the past when I work with these people, they're like some of the most brilliant people I've ever met. And we had a similar situation. In this particular scenario, the girl, I think, was 15 or 16 years old. And she was in a relationship with a dirtbag that was like 35, 36. And he was wicked smart. By the way, wicked smart. He was actually a custom app BSD developer. So they would, no, it wasn't that person. They would write custom BSD embedded device systems. Okay. So you would have like an embedded, let's say like a TV or something like that. He would write custom BSD code for those embedded devices. Now, this particular individual, once again, we knew who had the girl. Right? It's very rarely is it like they make it in the movies. Most of the time, whenever people are abducted, they're abducted by a family friend, somebody that is known to the child. If you ever have kids that disappear, there are kidnappings, absolutely. But a lot of those kids are escaping abusive households, or there's drugs involved. That's a whole nother story. But in this particular scenario, we were dealing with someone that was wicked smart technically. And he had a blog. He had a blog that he wrote where he was constantly talking about the oppressive government and how they were trying to control people's lives. And he would write blog posts about the age of consent and how it's so wrong. And if you're looking at the state of nature and how older men should be dating younger women, like an absolute complete dirtbag, right? Not a good dude. But whenever we were going to his blog and we got a warrant for the access to the blogs, he was smart enough to go through a VPN, going through Tor, and he was using a browser called Dillo, D-I-L-O, which has like hardly any JavaScript on it as well. Bare minimum stuff. And he was doing everything right. Okay. He was doing everything right. So what we ended up doing is we started looking at the event logs for who was accessing that blog. Cause I remember looking at it and we're like, wait a minute, there's like 5 browsers that are accessing this blog. I'm like, this one's mine. Is this one yours? Yeah, this one's yours. This one's yours. Okay, this one's his. But we have this other IP address that's constantly going and checking the blog. And it was a Microsoft, not Edge, it was a Microsoft Explorer at the time browser. So we noticed that for every post, you'd have law enforcement people checking it, right? The people we were working with on the team. And then this Microsoft browser kept coming every single time he posted. So what we discovered is he was using, and this gets really messed up. They had left the state where her dad lived and they went and lived with her mom. Her mom apparently liked the 35-year-old boyfriend and thought it was great that they were in a relationship together. So they were at her house in another state. Family was divorced. And every time he posted, he would go and double check and make sure that his post displayed correctly by using, not mother-in-law's, the girlfriend mom's browser. And other than law enforcement, it was the only people that ever looked at his blog post. When they acquired this individual, he seemed very shook up because, of course, right? Like, why don't we have a seat right over there? But he seemed to be more shook up that the only people that were reading his blog was him and law enforcement. If you don't, another story, if you want to look at it, look at the, was it Sarah Palin hacker? Really great story. If you look up Sarah Palin hacker, he broke into Sarah Palin's email and he took a screenshot and he had 6 tabs open and they were able to get a warrant for each one of those websites and seeing which IP address was logged in to each of those at the same time to find them. So once again, one of the things, excuse me, that we need to be really happy about is attackers are dumb and sometimes criminals are very stupid. So this is the first time I ever used this technique in Atlantic City at 3 o'clock in the morning. So there you go. All right, so let's continue moving on. So this is what it looks like, and this is awesome because it's not using Visual Basic, right? So we don't have to worry about Mark of the Web. What we have here is we have a cascading style sheet and we have a reference to a 1 pixel by 1 pixel image source tag. Just really super basic stuff, and it will fire. And your Word document looks like this. Looks like none of that stuff is there. And then when they open it, we get the user agent string, we get the request, we get what is the IP address, and the other database has like date timestamps and things like that as well. This is what it looks like in different Word viewing software programs: Abi Word, LibreOffice Writer, Apple Text Edit, and Microsoft Word. So this one works in a number of those as well. There we go. So Word web bugs in the enterprise, how would you actually use this? One of the key components of active defense is understanding the psychology of an attacker, right? Like if we're looking at the individual that's posting his blogs through Dillo, going through a browse, going through Tor, going through an anonymizing VPN, he's stupid. The Sarah Palin guy, he wanted notoriety. So he posted it, the picture out online, gave him away. Also been mentioned that did it on 4chan, which is a bad idea. Don't do that ever. But you can also use word web bugs for incident response. You can use these Canary tokens in incident response. If you believe that one of your systems is compromised, you can put these things with the right name on these devices so that people will, when they're hacking your systems, will pull them off. We're able to get that callback and be able to identify those attackers. All right, so let's go through. We got a few more things I want to talk about. Then we're going to do a lab in the next break. There's a bunch of commercial cyber deception products out there, tons of them. And it's sometimes very difficult to get money for these cyber deception products. It just is. And some are more expensive than others. Some of them are better than others, but you want to be able to get management approval for doing this in your environment. The best way to do it is implement some of the techniques that we cover in this class. Implement them, get some quick small wins against your next pen test, demonstrate it, and then go get these commercial products that are out there. So we're going to go through some Active Directory cyber deception things that you can put in place that are really, really super easy to set up, quick, dirty, awesome. So the first one is Active Directory Honey Admin. We talked about creating a Honey user, right? We created a Honey user with a script. We created a filter of that user being accessed. You can do it with an administrator level account as well, but you have to protect that administrator level user, right? Because the attackers may do a password spray, but they also may go directly to administrator accounts as well, right? So how do we lock down that account without locking down that account? Because many of the tools that are out there, if they see the account is locked, they will not allow you to do a password spray against it. Good password spraying tools will avoid those types of accounts. So what I recommend to lock those accounts out is keep the account activated, give it a long, strong password, set the password to never expire, but disable the login hours. Disable the login hours. So they can't log in on Sunday. They can't log in on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I'm in love, or Saturday. They just can't log in on any hours anywhere. They will see this account. They'll see it's an admin account. They'll see that it's active. They'll see a password that doesn't expire, and they're going to jump in and try to hit that account. And as soon as they do, it's not going to work because login hours have been disabled. And then you can have a simple little SIM, a little filter, something in your alerting that fires off and says that somebody is trying to authenticate as that account, just like our password spraying lab that we did earlier. Get an event log associated with it. The other one that I want to talk about is, oh, we got the spinning wheel of death now. Let me try to open that up. There we go. Another question that I get while we're waiting this to load properly is, shouldn't older accounts be chosen? Very, very good question that I get all the time about older versus newer accounts. So let me put this in a, in a different way. What is epoch time? Think about it. And you can Google it real quick, pause it and go to, Google, what is epoch time? Epoch time equals 0. So I want you to think of time sense, like how does your system track time? What it does is it counts the number of seconds from epoch time. Now, many people would say that epoch time is January 1st, 1970, and they would be right. They would also be wrong. They would be right for Unix and many of the different timestamps that exist on Windows, but not all of them. The epoch time for login accounts in Active Directory is January 1st, 1601. January 1st, 1601. Why January 1st, 1601? Why that date? All right. So while you're thinking about this, right, I want you to think that I go back in time, right? I go back in time and I meet George Washington. I would love to meet George Washington. The dude's almost mythical, right? Stories of like his clothes, having bullet holes in him and he survived. The fact that he had unanimous support, not once, but twice. And people will say, well, it was a simpler time then. No, it wasn't. It was crazy. I want to meet George Washington. That would be great. And I go up to George Washington on his birthday and I go up to him and I go, happy birthday, Mr. President. Happy birthday. And he looks at me and he's like, what the hell is going on? Like, I'm sure he wouldn't say it that way, right? I'm updating it. And he would say something like, one, you're freaking crazy. Two, you're making me uncomfortable. And three, it is not my freaking birthday. But I went on his birthday. What happened? So before America was actually America, we were part of the British Empire. And the British Empire used the Julian calendar. Eventually, everybody switched over to the Gregorian calendar. The dates didn't match perfectly. And if you look at January 1st, 1601, that's as far back as Microsoft could see where the validity of the dates that we use in the Gregorian calendar would be valid. So if you look at an account and it says last logon date, January 1st, 1601, it means it's never been logged into. And a lot of the tools will avoid any one of those dates that are January 1st, 1601. So what you do is you log into that system. So you have to log in so it updates the last login account timestamp from January 1st, 1601. All right. Some additional fun things. This is just stupid. Just a stupid trick. This is an infinitely recursive directory trick. Okay. So if an attacker, let's say ransomware, gets on your system and they want to do a search automatically through every single file on the system, we can do this. And you can do this if you want. We do CD to the top level directory. We make a directory called go away. We CD into go away. We create a symlink called dir1 that's in the directory that we're currently into. If we do dir space /s for recursive or subdirectories, it gets to 128 characters and it stops. But if we do a second symlink with the name dir2, also to go away, it infinitely recursive. And if the attacker's automatically trying to find a file on your system, it'll loop through this forever and seize their tool trying to find any files on your system. So that's a fun little trick of infinitely recursive directory loops. Yeah. More deception. There's a bunch of tools out there that you can run. I've given you some links for some GitHub projects, deploy deception, and Active Directory, creating a bunch of decoy objects. So check out some of these projects in Active Directory. We have another tool called Cred Defense that we wrote at BHIS, and we are going to be updating that tool. And then we have a blog post on doing cyber deception lures and Microsoft Sentinel as well. All right. So I don't know where my stuff is here. So I now want to take a lab where we're going to create an infinitely recursive, not an infinitely recursive directory loop. We're going to create a Honeyshare. All right. So we are going to go to intro labs and I'm going to go back to the lab again. There we go. And we are going to do this lab and it's going to take us up to, and it's going to take us through the break. And let's just give it another 15 minutes on the other side. So we'll have 25 minutes once I start this lab. So the idea is we have Honey users, right? The idea is we have Honey files, but we can also create a Honey share. And what a Honey share does is it's a share that sits on the system. And if an attacker gets on your network and they try to enumerate shares, you can have a share there that is a trap. And in this lab, we're creating a trap share that is called secret. Secret, I got a secret. We're going to create that share. And the idea is we want to collect as much information as we possibly can about the attacker when they hit this share. Okay. So, let me scroll down. So you're going to open up Kali. You're going to go to your Kali command prompt. And then you're going to go to Impacket Examples. And then you're going to start the share. Python 3, SMB server, SMB2 support, comment, secret, I've got a secret. And it takes a few moments for this to start, by the way. It takes a few moments for this to actually kick off and run. Then you're going to open up a Windows command prompt, and then you're going to run netuse to try to mount that share. It's going to give you a warning, and I'm going to talk about this warning and how fun this warning actually is. Like, we'll get to that here in a moment, but you're going to see the trap was triggered. So We've got, let's say, we've got the clock. We got lab time is set to 28 minutes. That sounds good because we have a break. We come back. We'll talk about this. I know some of you are playing with some of your honey tokens, and we'll resume now in 28 minutes and 20 seconds. All right, let's get rolling. If you need anything else, please let us know. Let's go through this lab because this lab actually has one of my favorite twists of any of the labs that we have in this class. I just love it. So let's go ahead and let's get started. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to open up this Kali Linux terminal, of course, because we're always going to go to Linux. There we go. Sure, we'll keep the firewall down. We're going to accept the key-based fingerprint from Kali. Do that right there. And then we're going to go ahead and get our IP address with ifconfig. Like so. Oops. That doesn't work that way. I totally messed it up by trying to do traditional copying and pasting with Control C and Control V. So we're going to do copy and paste. There we go. I got ifconfig. I got my IP address. Then we're going to CD into opt and packet examples. These are fun things you can do with Impacket. There we go. And now we are going to start the SMB server. Now, this particular command takes a little while for it to run. There we go. Let's go ahead and kick that off and let's talk about this. All right. So one of the things that we need to have more discussion of, rather than talking about individual tactics that attackers are using, is what is the frequency in which those attack tactics. I created a new word. Look at me. The frequency at which different tactics are using, right? Or used. Tactics are used. Let's go with that. That makes more sense. And I think that this is critical because if we don't have the idea of frequency and prevalence of the attacks that we see in something like the MITRE attack technique matrix, then we're trying to defend everything. And I don't know if you've ever heard of the quote, when everything is a top priority, nothing is a priority, right? Because if you're trying to solve everything, you're not going to prioritize and actually get anything done at all. But I will tell you from years of experience, there's a handful of things that attackers do right out of the gate, right? They try to do password sprays. In Active Directory, we start out with one of our first labs, creating a Honey user account of Frank. We've got them right there, right off the bat. If they're going after admin accounts, we've got them there as well. And one of the things that attackers are going to do is they're going to search for files. And we've got them there, right? We can create files with the right name on file shares that they're going to try to run. The other thing that they're going to do is they're going to try to identify file shares in the environment that look interesting. Usually they'd be looking for a name of a share and something like help desk, backups, something like that they can get. And usually what they're looking for, if they can get access to password files, Excel spreadsheets, documents, that's so good, right? Like as an attacker, that's just a gift from God. But the other thing that they're looking for are things like images of virtual machines or backup snapshot files of virtual machines. Because if they can get those ISOs, those VMDK files, if they can get snapshot files, then the attacker can download those and parse through memory. They can download those and mount the ISO. They can download those and then they can go through and go to the VMDK and pull out files. They do this all of the time. So what we're doing is we're creating traps for user accounts. We're creating traps for the files that they go after. On the outside, we're creating web server traps with infinitely recursive directories. On the inside, we're going to create this share that tricks the attacker as well. So I'm going to open up a command prompt here, and we're going to copy and paste the command to mount that share. And once again, this is one of my favorite things in this entire course. So we'll go through and talk about that here in just a second. I don't know about you guys, but lately I've had Pink Pony Club in my head. Like my son and his girlfriend were playing that song and then they sing it constantly. So some of you are like, I don't even know what the hell he's talking about. Pink Pony what? it's addicting. It's a really, really fantastically well done song. If you don't know, you can get the link to the video. It's good. All right, so we got 10.10.221.74, and then we're trying to access that secret share. All right. So if I try to access that, one of my favorite things in this class, as I was talking about, is right here. Not that. It's right here. It says, hello. You can't access this shared folder because your organization's security policies block unauthenticated guest access. These policies help protect your PC from unsafe or malicious devices on the network. Thank you for your consideration. Now that's what it says, right? Do you ever like hear that like phrases where people like never listen to what people tell you to do, watch what they do? Don't listen to what people say, watch their hands, right? So Microsoft is like, this is dangerous. You should not be doing these things, okay? We're going to protect you. We protected your PC. But in the background, it totally dumped your user ID. It dumped your password hash. It dumped the date timestamp, the machine name. It gave up everything, right? It's just crazy. It's basically like saying, oh no, none of the stuff that we did was classified. And then somebody just boom, drops a bunch of classified information proving that it was classified. That's bad. That's bad. Totally talking about the War Thunder forms, right? We're talking about forms and things like that. But no, we've got all of it, right? Just beautiful, beautiful, beautiful stuff. And look at this from like an IR perspective. Like if somebody tries to go through this and you're an incident responder, right? You're getting this, okay, we've got this user, we've got the IP address, we've got the host name, we've got everything we need. Let's go get them, right? It's great. It's great. Super cool stuff. All right, let's go ahead and let's talk a little bit about attack and how you can convert different files and a little bit of a hint on bypassing antivirus engines, things of that nature as we move on. One of the cool things inside of the Metasploit framework is the ability to export any executable to a Visual Basic application. So if you have a backdoor, if you have a tool that you really like that is an executable, you can convert it into a VBA and then you can import it into a Word document of your choosing. So check that out. If you're playing with backdoors, and we have other labs where we create malware, go look at like the App Locker and the Sysmon labs. We create malware and other classes, but you can convert any of those into Visual Basic applications. What can one do with the Visual Basic application? That's a fantastic question. One of the tools that we've created, and we need to get this lab updated. I'll explain why we're not doing it as a lab right now and what's changed in the background. You can take those Visual Basic applications and you can import them into Word documents. You can take those Visual Basic applications and you can put them inside of Excel spreadsheets. You can put these in a variety of different formats. And then if the attacker downloads the Word doc and runs it, bang, you've got their wireless network signals. So check this out. What it does is it executes PowerShell, NetSH, WLAN, show networks, mode equals BSSID, and it's going to pull down a list of all the wireless networks around that system. It's going to take that, drop it into a file called Wi-Fi DAT, base64, encode it, and shoot it back to you, the defender. So you're no longer dealing with Tor at all. So the attacker can be going through a VPN. They can bouncing through, you know, what is it? I'm at 7 proxies. Come at me, bruh. You don't care, right? Honey Badger don't care. It gets bit by a cobra, it takes a nap, and it finishes eating the cobra. That's Honey Badger. So you're going through all of these different things. Great, I don't care because I'm going to get a wireless site survey of all the wireless access points near you, and I get level of access that's just crazy, crazy accurate. Now, originally this was created by Tim Tomes. It's a really, really simple Java applet, VB applet, any number of different things that records geolocation of attackers when they're coming down on your environment. Makes operating system calls, gets wireless, and then it feeds that data into Google Maps via their geolocation API. And it works. The reason why we don't run it as a class anymore is Google requires you to register for your API keys. We used to just be able to pull down API keys and do whatever we wanted, and that was fun. But now we have to register it, and I feel a little uncomfortable just giving out a valid geolocation API to my students. And I also feel super uncomfortable having all of my students go through the steps of registering for a Google API every single time, but it works. You put in your Google API key and it's part of the startup procedures for Honeybadger, and it works really, really, really super well. Most of the time, most of the time. Now, what are some of the funnest stories we've had with Honeybadger since Tim Tomes originally created it, and we've had other people fork it? This is an honest to God attack against, I can't remember if it was a BHIS server or one of Tim's personal servers when he was creating this. And we had a direct attack against one of our servers directly from Moscow. Now, at the time, that seemed pretty funny. It seems less funny now. But direct pinpoint right on top of where these people were trying to attack some of our resources. The way it sends that data is this. Let me zoom in and I'll show you real quick. The first thing it does is it gets a wireless survey. So you can see that we have John Strand 2's guest network, John Strand 2's network. We've got Linksys. We have this printer. I think that that's a printer. We have the BSSID, and then it gives the signal attenuation. It captures that data and it submits that data base 64 encoded. It decodes it, and then it sends it to Google as this JSON request. And then when Google responds, it responds back with this. It says, this is the latitude, this is the longitude, this is the accuracy. And a lot of these APIs haven't changed much. You submit the request and then Google responds back, and they don't really change it because it's the same thing that every single app on Android or apps that are Google-based apps and iOS are using, and they're tracking that information all the time. So we're riding right on top of it. Just some really fun ones. We've had some people in Melbourne. This lower one was his house when he got it working. And by the way, his office was in the corner of the house right there. An attacker was attacking from Melbourne. This is another person out in Russia. This was a student that was attacking one of our servers, like I can't remember if it was Tim's or BHIS's, from Pepperdine University. And it actually dumps the username and the host name, latitude and longitude, and it put it right at the dorm of that student that was trying to attack our servers, which I think is pretty fun. Now, you can embed this because it's VB, or you can also kick out a Java applet. You can embed this directly into like a VNC app. And this gets into a weird sort of SANS story. Years ago, while I was still teaching at the SANS Institute, I had other people trying to teach this class, and they didn't do real well. And I like these instructors are great. I mean, it's tough under the best of circumstances to try and teach somebody else's class is really, really difficult, especially whenever the main author of the class is like a crack-addled squirrel, and the slides follow the logic of a crack-addled squirrel that has ADHD, crippling ADHD. And we were talking about VNC apps, right? And one of the students at a very large Fortune 1 company was very frustrated. They were like, well, VNC apps, no one's using VNC. This is all out of date. I don't understand why we do this. But the thing that the instructor, who's a very near and dear friend of mine, didn't put out to them is that's the whole freaking point. I mean, okay, look, seriously, if you look at something as a trap and somebody is like, well, that technology is old, that is exactly what hackers are looking for, right? Hackers are actively looking for old, out of date technology. That's like our whole bag, baby. Yeah, we're constantly trying to hack into things, finding old technology. That's our thing. So if we do something that's a fake VNC app, right now on the open internet that Shodan is aware of, there's 972 VNC servers that are just sitting out there with no authentication, just waiting, just sitting there. I mean, it's not even hacking at this point, but that's the point. If you're going to go fishing, you don't go fishing with bait that's like, oh, well, we don't want to fish with bait that's easy. We got to fish with difficult bait. Yeah. Like concrete. I don't know. I don't know what difficult bait is. I went off the rails, folks. I went too far at that point. Let's go, sports, go. So One of our other customers, and this is one of my favorite stories ever in computer security. A long, long, long time ago, we had a customer that was in Germany, and I'm heading out to Germany this Sunday. We're trying to expand our operations. We have a number of customers in Germany, and we have some employees in Germany. And we had this big, scary bank in Germany that was like, "Hey, we want you to come hang out." And I went and I hung out. The problem with me going and hanging out is they wanted me to hang out the week of Thanksgiving. So I sent them a proposal that was kind of like a little bit of a go away proposal. Like, I'll come, but I'm going to be honest with you, it's going to be expensive. And they totally signed the contract. And when they submitted the PO, they submitted the PO in euros and not in dollars. And at the time, the value of a euro was 150% of a US dollar. So they signed the contract with 150% of the money that I really put in. So I take this contract down to my wife, and I'm like, "Hey, honey, I've got this contract. We've got a bit of a problem, right? We got a bit of an issue here. I didn't expect them to sign it, but they signed it." And my wife is absolutely 100% justified, right? If she's like, "That's the week of Thanksgiving. This time that we spend with our family is sacred. We all need to be together for the holidays because we only have so many holidays together as a family. And now you're going to leave for one of these few times that we have." And while she's kind of chewing my ass, justifiably so, she looks down at the contract and she just walks out of the kitchen. I'm like, "Dude, she's silent." Like, there's levels of anger in relationships. And she's silent. And I'm like, "Hey, honey, what are you doing?" She's like, "I'm going to pack." So we flew my entire family, like my wife and kids, we all like loaded up and we go to Germany. And we hang out in Germany for 2 weeks. My wife also ordered the hotel room, and it was tough finding a hotel. The group wanted us to stay at the Hilton. The Hilton was super expensive. Rooms were scarce. We couldn't get two rooms adjoining, and our children were really small at that age. So she found a hotel that was a mile walk from the location, which is fine because I like walking. And and when we got to this hotel, it was in the red light district. And I remember this hotel was not a hotel, it was an hotel because the H was burnt out. And we like it was so bad walking down the street with Google Maps that, this whole area kind of catered to Americans. And when we're walking down the street, this one lady across the street yells, it's like, "You looking for a good time?" And my kids are like, "Yes, we are. Yes, we are. Yes, we are." So we get to this hotel, and it's one of those high class places that has like a gate that you have to like buzz to get in. So we buzz is like, "Nee," and the lady is like, "What do you want?" And we're like, "Oh, we have a reservation. We're here." And she buzzes us in. We get there, and the first thing she does when she sees us is, "Oh my God, you have children. We need to get new carpet in your hotel room. I swear to God." And when you're at a conference, my wife will be there. You can ask her about this story. And she yells at some dude in German, and he comes out with a big roll of carpet on his shoulder, and he like walks up the stairs. And this lady is the sweetest lady you've ever met. She is making us food. "I'll make you guys something. I'll make you guys something. We got little coffee cookies, and we'll make you guys something. We're so happy. We don't get families in here very often. It's so good that you guys are here. We're so excited." And we're just like, "Ah." And by the way, this is over a plastic mold injection conference. So there were no other hotels that we could find at this point. So we're going through all of this, and finally the guy comes down. We go up to our room, and like the carpet is like this roughly cut carpet where there's like jagged edges around the corner. And the two rooms are together. We get set up, we get settled in, we shut the door, and the door unlocks when my wife and I are in bed. And the guy that did the carpet just like busts in, comes up right next to me and goes, "Don't let the children turn on the televisions." And he goes up and he unplugs the televisions in both rooms and then like storms out. And we're like, "What the hell?" So this is a bad night, right? This is a bad night. It turns out they were wonderful. They were wonderful hosts. They took care of my wife and kids. They had full breakfast every morning. It was just great. And it was totally like every channel was a different type of porn. Because I went and I'm like, I got to figure out what the hell's going on. Because my kid spent like the next 2 weeks trying to plug the televisions back in, right? Just trying to plug it in. So I swear to God, truth, please, if you see us at a conference, ask my wife about it. She'll confirm. But we spent 2 weeks. We set up some honeypot deception at this particular bank. We had a couple of banks that we were doing work with at this time. And after 2 weeks, we saw this robots.txe. Don't go to these directories. Here's some tracking software that we had embedded in after a warning banner. We had something like 275 people that were actively attacking this bank. We took all of these ASNs, which are like internet zip codes, and we did a lookup to see if any internal systems were going to any of these ASNs. And we found like 3 or 5 compromised computer systems that they didn't detect before this actual thing. So again, folks, this is threat intelligence, right? This is threat intelligence. This is what we should be trying to do actively in our organization. This is another one. This is a long time ago. Great fun that we had. It was over a decade ago. Chris Brenton now works for, he's now the COO of Active Countermeasures. So he's behind the RETA and Active Countermeasures AC Hunter team. And his previous job, he worked in a cloud solutions provider. And they had one of their servers compromised. And he asked me if I wanted to come have fun. And I'm like, hells to the yeah, I want to have fun because it's fun to have fun, but you have to know how. So we set up a bunch of cyber deception on the server that was controlling a botnet. And we shut down the SSH ports. We opened up just VNC, and we were able to track over a 24-hour period all of the people that were part of the botnet because they were trying to log in and gain access to their botnet control server. And you could see that they were calling each other up and they're like, hey, well, do you see anything here? Well, I can't get logged in. You try logging in. You try logging in with your password. Just Jimmy in Vancouver now? And we basically mapped out clearly this botnet group. And we went to law enforcement and we're like, yo, here you go. And they had no idea what to do. They were just like, I don't know. Do we get warrants? I'm like, I would recommend that, right? Law enforcement did nothing. They didn't know what to do. It's like, here's all the hackers that hacked this server and we're running it as a botnet. Here's the pins on their houses. Go. And they're like, we aren't used to working that way at all. All right. So let's, we already got that. So I want to kind of close out this section. Okay. I want to close this out, and you have a lot of people that have been through Chris Brenton's Active Countermeasures class. You should check that out. He's got some pay what you can classes as well in an anti-siphon. They're absolutely amazing. So check those out. So once again, just kind of wrap this up. Active defense is using those limited offensive actions and counterattacks. We're going to deny the attacker's position, right? We want to get away from purely passive defensive approach, right? We've got to get better at our detection, and active defense is there, and it's designed for that. I don't know why. There we go. Why my icon is, I have like a web thing. Lab of a pen tester deploy deception. That's really weird. But we need to get better with this stuff. We want to use that attacker's action and activity against themselves. They get excited. They think they're in. They see an admin account, a user account, a service account. They see these different things and they think that they've got it. And we want to use that inertia against them. We're trying to mess with the detection time plus reaction time so that the attacker's time is much higher, right? We want to get this equation so it's better, not necessarily balanced, but we want it to be skewed in our favor. We want to start increasing the amount of time it takes for an attacker to successfully break into an environment. And once again, cyber deception should never be something that replaces the other layers of defense that we have. We just shouldn't, right? We just shouldn't. And ultimately, this is about changing the game. This is about actively engaging the enemy. This is about disrupting their OODA loop, getting away from the easy button and actually making computer security fun. So it's not all just compliance. It's not all just like waiting for the red alert to go off and say we've been hacked and then dealing with it. We can have fun. And by making it fun and changing that calculation, we will have fewer attacks because the perceived risk and the perceived danger, as soon as an attacker sees this deception is deployed, they're going to change their strategies. Like I told you, I had one rule: don't get caught. Don't get caught. So we are at the end of the class. However, we've got some housekeeping things that we need to do. Megan, are you present and accounted for? Megan? Because
Sorry,
somebody has to win
who's
bingo.
backstage?
All right. All right. Do we have a winner?
Wait, do we have a winner? People are still DMing me. Let me
You got to cut it off
give me
sometime.
1 minute.
Okay.
1 minute. 1 minute. You start and
All right.
I'll
So I'll do my thing. I'll kind of run through my thing. Just so you know, we are doing another pay what you can class in 2 weeks. It's Intro to SOC Core Skills. If you all could like share that out with people in your community, it's really we're trying to get out there and we're trying to help as many people as we possibly can. And in that class, we're going to introduce a Patreon or I think it might be a Square Donate where people can donate to this because we get that all the time. People are like, hey, I didn't pay anything for this, but I'd like to, or I'd like to help other people. It's going to be a pay it forward donation. So that's going to be a thing. There is the SOC Core Skills coming out in 2 weeks. So next week I'm off. The week after that, I'm teaching from Germany, and I'm excited to see all of you there. And we'll get that rolling.
okay, I have a
So
winner.
all right, we've got a winner. Who is the winner?
Are we gonna drum roll? Jelly Bean Stir is the
What?
winner. Jelly Bean
No
Stir.
way.
Yay! So I
Awesome.
will send you a message and get your information. But way to go. I know you've been in a lot of these classes and you've tried and tried and tried. And today is your lucky day. So
Nailed
congratulations.
it. And what did they win? A full
Oh,
catalog of every single anti-siphon class on demand, which by the way, you can totally acquire for the low price of 1,500. Once
yes. Let me
again,
find that link. I'll
that
post it in there.
is something like 95% off, 97% off list price for all of those classes. So it's a pretty cool thing. By the way, if your organization's looking for that training, we do bundle that up in corporate subscriptions as well. So I want to kind of talk a little bit about some things, closing things. I'm getting good at this. We're getting good at this, Megan
Yes, we
and
are.
Daryl. We're getting this down. We want to talk a little bit about how this started and what we do and why we do it this way. Why are we running these things differently? And it started a long time ago. During COVID, we had a conversation with the team about trying to do scholarships for underrepresented people in the InfoSec community. Okay. And I'm not gonna dance around it at all. The majority of the InfoSec community looks like me, middle-aged, balding, white dude, black shirt, jeans, right? That's the community, the overwhelming number of people in the community. And there's a number of reasons why it is that way. And we can get into some of the historical, psychological, sociological things associated with it. That's navel gazing, right? Let's instead have a conversation on how we can do better. All right. How can we actually do better moving forward? And a lot of people, whenever they try to solve problems, they try to reach for a solution that many people have done. And it's got all heart and the heart's in the right place, but it doesn't change the game. Right. So we reached, or people were talking and they're like, we should do scholarships. And here's my problem with scholarships. All right. We don't have, some people are like, I don't have any pants on, sir. But let's talk about scholarships and why I hate scholarships. All right. And by the way, for the people that get scholarships, this is life changing and it's great for them. And I'm not minimizing that at all. And there's the link for the Black Friday sale, which we keep up and running. If you know where to find it, you got it. The problem I have with scholarships is this, like, we're going to pick, let's say women, we're going to say African American, we're going to say Pacific Islanders, we're going to say Native Americans, we're going to say these different groups. And you can keep going, right? You can go all the way down to people born in Appalachia. You can say that there's underrepresented people in South Dakota, and like this part of the world is a very impoverished part of the world. You can keep going down, and you can find all of these groups. And like I said, those scholarships, they absolutely do change the lives of the people that receive them, but doesn't fundamentally change the way the game is played. All right. It doesn't change it. So what we wanted to do is to do something that we weren't specifically calling out a group, but we were breaking it down by creating a system that doesn't care. I don't care what your socioeconomic status is. I don't care what your race is. I don't care what your gender is. I don't care what your religion is. I don't care what your sexual orientation is. I don't care what color your hair is. I do not care. I want to burn all of those barriers down, because if you look at what holds people back, we can talk about a number of different things, but the fact is the biggest thing that holds people back is money. People that grew up in inner cities and poor parts of cities, money. People that grew up in South Dakota in the middle of the Black Hills who look like me can't get into this industry, money. Right? It keeps coming back to that money thing again and again and again and again. And we wanted to burn that gate down. This is SANS quality training. This is what SANS is like, right? If you look at anti-siphon, we got a bunch of former SANS instructors. We're burning that bridge down, and we're making these introductory level classes available to people at where they can afford it. And the reason why is because for those of you that are here, there's a lot of judgment. There's a lot of judgment. And I want to talk about that here in a second. There's a lot of judgment for people that are poor. So I want to call out two specific groups. The first group I want to call out is the people that chose to pay for this class, even when they didn't have to pay for this class. I want to say thank you. And I think everybody should give a round of applause for the people that chose to pay for this class, because they make this technically, financially possible. All of this costs money. Having the people here, the labs cost money, the Discord management costs money, everything costs money, and these people pay and they make it possible. Okay? And they didn't have to pay a dime. And I appreciate you all from the bottom of my heart. The second group of people I want to call out is the people that didn't pay. Now, if I was televangelist, this is the part where I'd say, if you could find it within your hearts to dig deep. No. I grew up in a family where my dad was on disability. My mom worked in food service for a school. So if you want to kind of just run that through your head, we didn't have a lot of money. I understand what it is like to put duct tape on your shoes to get your shoes through to the next point where you can buy shoes. I understand what it is like to go to school and be embarrassed because you have that much extra space on your pants and you have the high water pants because you cannot afford to get new pants. And I'm going to tell you, my parents were not stupid. My parents were not lazy. They worked their asses off. And for all of you people that are working hourly wages out there, I know what it's like to have people look at you and judge you and basically say, well, you know, have you tried not being poor? Have you tried buckling down and maybe not getting the lattes at Starbucks that you normally get? I know what it's like to have people judge you when you buy something for yourself and you're poor, and getting judged for buying a new phone, getting judged for buying new sheets, getting judged for maybe buying new shoes. I know what that's like. And for every single one of you that chose to be here, I also know that your time is delegated and your value is delegated to hours. How much time you spend working per hour, per job. Many of you are working multiple jobs and you're working a lot of time. And somehow out of this entire universe and everything that we've done here, you have taken the most precious thing that you have to offer to the universe, the only thing that has financial value, and you have chosen to give that to us. And we are eternally grateful. And I think that you all need a round of applause as well, because you chose to give your time to be here. That is time that you could have spent with your family. That is time you could have spent with your kids. That is time you could have spent with your spouse. That is time you could have spent healing yourself, mentally and physically for the bullshit that you endure for very little pay that gets you further and further behind. So we appreciate you and what you have done here. So I have a small request for everybody that is here and is listening to this. I need your help amplifying the signal. The fact that these classes are still going on and we're still doing them years after COVID, and we still get hundreds of people that show up again and again and again is truly an honor. The fact that we have people that come up to us at conferences and they talk to us and they say, because of your classes, I got a job. Because of your classes, I am no longer working two jobs. Because of your classes, I got a job that had healthcare benefits, and I'm finally able to get healthcare for my family. And oh, by the way, I got healthcare a month before we found out my son had cancer. And instead of just getting the crap cancer that we could get from Medicaid, my son was able to get the best care because I had a job that provided insurance. It's bullshit that we look at people based on their value is based on what they make per hour and how much money they make. So we're tearing down those columns, those foundations of information security training. So I need your help amplifying the signal. So we have a class that's coming up. If you can go and let people know, hey, there's a pay what you can class out on Twitter. Let people know what you thought of this class on LinkedIn. Let people know about what's coming up. Repost whenever we put things on Twitter. We would greatly appreciate it, because there's a lot of jobs in computer security, but they're hard to get. There's a lot of jobs in computer security, but they want you to have expertise. There's a lot of jobs in security, but that you want you to have the right skills. And we're doing everything we can to get those people the right skills that they need to take on those jobs. So I just want to say thanks again. It's been a great week. This is my capstone class. I love teaching this class. I love teaching all the classes that we teach, to be honest. And it's been awesome hanging out with you. Thank you so much. And I hope to see you at a conference soon in the future. Take care, and I'll see you hopefully in a couple of weeks. Later, everybody.
All right, everyone. So just to reiterate what John said, thanks again for joining us. The certificates of completion for everyone that registered will go out overnight tonight, and hopefully we see you in the next one. D. Brown, go ahead and kill it with fire. Have a good one, everyone.